In April 1986, the quiet community of Broadview Heights, Ohio, was shaken by fear when 13-year-old Robyn Field vanished. As people began searching for her, one person stood out. He kept asking, "Have you found her yet?" That person was the same one who already knew the truth. While pretending to care, he had Robyn's body hidden in the back of his vehicle. When everything came to light, it revealed a deliberate and shocking act that left the whole state stunned. Broadview Heights was a small town where people knew one another and daily life was steady and uneventful. Robyn Field lived there, and she was a lively, friendly girl who filled her time with activities. She was a talented athlete who ran track, did gymnastics, played softball, and was involved in cheerleading. She was full of life, and her energy affected everyone around her. At home, she had the support of a loving family. Robyn was the only child from her mother, Nancy Field's second marriage. Her father had died when she was just a baby, but Nancy raised her with great care. Nancy had 5 older children from her first marriage, and they all lived together, making the house feel full and loving. Robyn was raised in a home where giving and caring for others were part of daily life. Sadly, it was that kind, generous nature that someone would later exploit in a horrible way. On Tuesday, April 22, 1986, Robyn followed her normal school routine. She left for Rome Middle School in the morning and was expected to be back home between 2:45 and 2:50 p.m., just like always. But something went wrong that day. Around 3:30 p.m., Robyn's half-sister, Sharon Schultz, got a phone call. The caller was a 15-year-old boy named Warren Paxton Brown, who asked if Robyn was home. Sharon didn't find the question strange at the time. It was her birthday, and she had plans with Robyn later that day. But as time passed, and there was still no sign of Robyn, Sharon's concern began to grow. As the evening hours came, and no one had heard from Robyn, the level of worry increased quickly. Nancy Field returned home from work to find the house empty when Robyn should have been there. Panic set in immediately. Nancy began calling friends and relatives, hoping someone had seen her daughter or heard from her. But every call ended the same way. No one had. No one had seen Robyn since she left for school that morning. With the help of her family, Nancy organized a search. Relatives, friends, and neighbors all joined in. Paxton Brown helped. So did Robyn's next-door neighbor and close friend, Michelle Jackson, who was also 15. The group searched the streets of Broadview Heights, calling out Robyn's name again and again, their voices full of fear. Robyn's half-brother, Rick Schultz, arrived home later that evening, not knowing what had happened. When he walked into the house, it was unusually quiet. He saw a note that said Robyn was missing and that everyone was at their mother's house. His concern turned to dread right away. He found out Robyn had last been seen getting off the school bus with 2 boys, but no one had more details. From that point on, the search became even more urgent. Everyone involved kept looking through the night, using flashlights and calling for her in the dark, unwilling to give up. The search went into the next day. On Wednesday, April 23rd, the fear and uncertainty were heavy on everyone's hearts. Then, at 3:35 p.m., a man fishing along the South Rocky River in Strongsville came across something horrifying. He found a girl's body face down in the water, wrapped in a green sheet. He notified the police, who arrived quickly. The body was removed from the river and taken to Southwest Hospital. The task of identifying the body fell to Ken and Rick Schultz, Robyn's half-brothers. Rick, who was 23 years old at the time, had taken on a leadership role in the family out of necessity. A police officer from Bry met them at the hospital and gently warned them that the body was probably Robyn. At the hospital, Rick was brought into the room where the body lay. It was muddy and wrapped, placed on a stretcher. Slowly, the sheet was pulled back. Rick knew right away. It was Robyn. She had been found 5 miles from their home, a short distance that felt impossibly far in that moment. Somehow, Rick found the strength to return to the house. When he walked in, he had to do the hardest thing a person can do. He had to tell his mother that her daughter was gone. He looked at Nancy and, with deep sadness, told her that Robyn was no longer with them. The worst had happened. After Robyn's body was found, the investigation ran into serious problems right away. One of the biggest issues was the weather. The night she went missing had been extremely cold, and that had an effect on the condition of her body. Because the low temperature had preserved her body, the coroner couldn't figure out exactly when she died. That made it much harder for the investigators to know who might have had the opportunity to hurt her. Without a clear time of death, they couldn't narrow down suspects or build a clear timeline. As the investigation began, people in the town started talking. Rumors spread quickly. One of the first names people brought up was David White, who was thought to be one of Robyn's friends. He told the police that he might have seen Robyn riding her bike with a 17-year-old named Frank Salinka around 4 p.m. on the day she went missing. They were on Prospect Street. That tip led to a lot of people suggesting that Robyn might have had a romantic relationship with Frank. The story got more complicated when it came out that just a week earlier, Paxton Brown had told Robyn's half-sister Sharon that she should keep Robyn away from Frank. Paxton said he was worried that Frank could hurt her. That warning, in hindsight, stood out as a disturbing detail. But not everyone in Broadview Heights seemed to feel the weight of what had happened. According to Paxton, there was a student at Rome Middle School who had been shouting offensive things and seemed to take pleasure in Robyn's death. The fact that someone could act that way after what happened shocked people. It also showed a part of the community that many didn't want to think about. Then came a claim that made the case even more confusing. Robyn's half-brother, Rick Schultz, said that Michelle Jackson, Robyn's close friend and next-door neighbor, had told him something troubling. According to Michelle, Robyn had once shown her a note about strong feelings of depression. That single detail changed the direction of the investigation. Police had to stop and consider the possibility that Robyn hadn't been murdered, but instead may have taken her own life. That theory, based on the supposed depression note, led to major emotional strain on both the family and the investigators. Even though it turned out not to be true, it caused a lot of pain and confusion. Despite all the uncertainty, investigators finally made progress when they started re-interviewing the kids who rode the school bus. From those conversations, they began to piece together what actually happened during Robyn's last afternoon. Several students said they saw her get off the bus one stop earlier than usual at Baldwin and Wallace instead of near her house. She wasn't alone. With her were 14-year-old Jimmy Martin and Paxton Brown. This detail was different from what had been said earlier and helped form a more solid version of what Robyn's last known movements were. Not long after Robyn's body was found, Paxton gave his first official statement to police. He told them that he and Robyn had secretly been in a relationship for about 3 months. He said it had to be a secret because Robyn's family didn't like him. He claimed that one of Rick's sisters had even chased him away from the bus stop several times. According to Paxton, Robyn had suggested they get off the bus early that day so no one in her family would see them together. That was the reason he gave for being with her that afternoon. But when police looked closer at what he said, some clear problems appeared. Paxton didn't say anything about Jimmy Martin being with them. This was strange because both his aunt, Charlene, and his grandmother, Winfred Murphy, said Jimmy had definitely been there with Robyn and Paxton outside their home. When police asked Paxton about it, he gave a strange answer. He said Jimmy was there at first, but left when Charlene and Winfred showed up. Then, according to Paxton, Jimmy came back to the house around 5 p.m. that same evening. This explanation didn't make much sense. People started to wonder why Paxton hadn't just said Jimmy was there from the start. And why would Jimmy leave and come back like that? The pieces of Paxton's story weren't lining up, and it caused the investigators to take a much closer look at him as a possible suspect. Paxton gave his first version of events to the police, but the more closely it was examined, the more it started to fall apart. He said that once he and Robyn were in his bedroom, she suddenly ended their relationship. After that, according to him, she got very emotional, began crying, and ran out of the house. He claimed he waited about 10 minutes before calling Robyn's home, and when he did, Sharon told him Robyn hadn't come back. Paxton also told investigators that he went to Michelle Jackson's house around 9:30 p.m. that night, and from there, he and Michelle went to Frank Salinka's house. Frank, according to Paxton, said he hadn't seen Robyn that evening, But this timeline was directly challenged by what his aunt, Charlene, told police. She stated very clearly that Paxton had been in her bedroom the whole night watching videotapes and never left the house. That completely contradicted Paxton's story. If he stayed with Charlene all evening, he couldn't have gone to Michelle's or Frank's or called Robyn's home as he claimed. These major differences in accounts raised serious concerns about the truthfulness of what Paxton had said. At the same time, Robyn's half-brother, Rick Schultz, had been searching constantly, not able to sleep. By 3 a.m., even though it was a school night, he returned to Paxton's house, driven by instinct. He found the lights still on and the family awake, acting anxious. Rick asked to talk to Paxton, trying to find answers, but Paxton avoided giving any real information. What stuck with Rick the most was how quickly Paxton suggested they check Frank Salinka's house for Robyn, as if he wanted to redirect suspicion away from himself right away. Sharon Schultz, Robyn's half-sister, also began to strongly suspect Paxton. She remembered when Charlene drove Paxton to Michelle's house and stopped by Sharon's on the way. Something about how Paxton was acting during that visit made Sharon deeply uneasy. Her suspicions started to grow. Police interviewed Jimmy Martin again on April 22nd, the day Robyn's body was found. Jimmy confirmed that he had walked with Robyn and Paxton to Paxton's house, but he then claimed that he never returned that night, which clashed directly with Paxton's detailed claim that Jimmy walked back to the house around 5 p.m. Jimmy's story still had gaps, but even in its early form, it contradicted what Paxton had told police. Attention then shifted toward Michelle Jackson, Robyn's closest friend. Both Nancy and Sharon noticed that Michelle seemed strangely unemotional about Robyn's death. Her lack of reaction disturbed them. They also suspected Michelle might have been jealous of Robyn, especially because of Robyn's connection with Frank Salinka. Then it came out that the night before Robyn disappeared, she and Michelle had a serious argument. The cause was a secret kiss that had happened between Michelle and Paxton. Robyn had written Michelle an angry note, calling her a bitch and saying she knew exactly what happened. What Robyn meant by that wasn't fully clear, but it suggested that something deeper was going on between the two girls. Michelle's response to Robyn's note raised even more red flags. She wrote a harsh letter back, and at the bottom, she drew a disturbing picture of a tombstone with Robyn's name written on it. Michelle later claimed it just meant their friendship was over, but to Robyn's family and the investigators, the image felt like more than that. It seemed almost predictive. Michelle also made claims that Robyn had been doing things that didn't fit her character, such as heavy drinking, adding more confusion, and raising questions about Michelle's motives. The next day, on April 23rd, when Robyn's body was found, Paxton contacted Nancy Field and told her he had found Robyn's purse at his house. Sharon quickly offered to go get it. She met up with Paxton, Michelle, and another friend in a silver car on Wallace Drive. Paxton gave Sharon the purse and said his Aunt Charlene had found it on his bed. The story didn't sit right with Sharon. Her suspicion deepened, and she warned Paxton that he should come clean, telling him she would insist on a polygraph test. Paxton's response was oddly calm. He said he had taken it 3 times before, which struck Sharon as extremely strange. She couldn't understand how a 15-year-old could have taken 3 polygraphs. It made her wonder what kind of history he was hiding. Sharon's concerns about Paxton grew stronger. She knew about his troubled background. He had been kicked out of school often and was failing every class. Robyn, being kind, had offered to help him with schoolwork, which led to a short period where his behavior seemed to improve. But Paxton was known to be violent. People in his own family were said to be afraid of him. There were even claims, though unconfirmed, that Charlene bought him alcohol to keep him calm. He led a group called the Masters of Destruction, who were known for attacking younger kids and for setting fires and breaking into places like Smith and Fairwood Elementary, the Barrier Board of Education, and St. Mary's Catholic School. One account, shared by Norman Clark, described Paxton punching his own mother, Linda Murphy, in the face. He had just come back from a stay at the Gala Rehabilitation Center in Indiana. Rick had even heard some deeply disturbing, though unconfirmed, stories about Paxton being involved in devil worship and keeping some kind of shrine in his closet. All of this made him seem increasingly dangerous. Feeling disturbed by all of this, Sharon went to Paxton's house to talk with Charlene. Winfred Murphy, Paxton's grandmother, answered the door, and Charlene came to speak with her. What followed was a series of conflicting stories. Charlene first said she found the purse outside, then changed her story and said it was inside the house. Her version of what happened with Robyn that day also kept changing. At first, she said Robyn never came inside. Then she said Robyn was there for only a few minutes. Later, she admitted it might have been more like 25 minutes. Sharon left even more suspicious than before. Her belief that Paxton was involved was growing stronger, but she still didn't know the whole story. Rick Schultz, after hearing everything Sharon had learned, finally lost control. When he saw Paxton driving away in a car, he chased him down. When he caught him, he grabbed Paxton by the neck and lifted him off the ground. He demanded answers, yelling that they had to find Robyn and that she better still be alive. Paxton just stared at him with a blank, cold expression and said one word, "Alive?" Rick was so overwhelmed by what he saw in Paxton's face that he tried to hit him, but others pulled him away. That moment, more than anything else, convinced Rick that Paxton knew far more than he was saying, and that whatever had happened to Robyn was far worse than anyone wanted to believe. The police decided to bring Jimmy Martin back in for another interview on May 1st, a little over a week after Robyn's body was discovered. They had noticed too many gaps and contradictions in both his statements and in what Paxton Brown had told them. This second interview turned out to be critical. During that session, Jimmy gave a full confession that completely changed the course of the case. He told investigators that Robyn's murder had not been random or sudden. It had been planned in advance. On Sunday, April 20th, 2 days before Robyn went missing, Paxton told Jimmy that he was going to kill Robyn. He said he wanted to do it because he believed Robyn had used him. Then he asked Jimmy to help. Jimmy agreed, but later said he didn't actually think Paxton meant it. He thought it was just a disturbing statement, not something that would really happen. He was wrong. Jimmy went on to explain that he had been with Paxton when they were at Paxton's house. At one point before the attack, Paxton went into his Aunt Charlene's room to use the phone. While there, he told her what he was planning to do. According to Jimmy, Charlene laughed when she heard this. She didn't believe him and thought he was joking. She didn't understand how serious and dangerous Paxton actually was. There had been signs earlier that something was wrong in Paxton and Robyn's relationship. It had grown more intense and troubling over time. Robyn had told someone she was afraid to break up with him because she thought he might hit her. That fear turned out to be well-founded. In one incident, Paxton had grabbed her by the hair and pulled her down a hallway. A teacher who saw this referred to it as a lover's quarrel, not realizing how serious and dangerous the situation really was. On Tuesday, April 22nd, the day Robyn disappeared, Jimmy described exactly what happened. On the school bus that afternoon, Robyn and Paxton sat in the back seat together, while Jimmy sat in front of them. Paxton asked Robyn to come to his house to listen to a tape, and she agreed. During the ride, Paxton leaned over to Jimmy and said something that didn't make sense. "Should we care? But..." Then he said, "Should we care about her?" Robyn overheard part of their conversation and asked what they were talking about. Paxton answered that they were just talking about how to rate girls. It was a lie to cover up what he really meant. When they got to Paxton's house, he took Jimmy into the bathroom and told him to turn up the radio. He said he was about to commit the crime. They went back to the bedroom, where Paxton sat next to Robyn and asked her to get back together with him. She said no and tried to leave. Paxton blocked the door, dragged her back to the bed, and spit in her face. Then he forced her to the floor, held one hand over her throat and the other over her mouth, and asked Jimmy to help him. Jimmy refused. Even though he had agreed earlier, in that moment, he was too afraid and would not take part in the attack. Paxton didn't stop. He pushed Robyn onto her back and began hitting her head on the floor again and again until she passed out. After a few minutes, he let go. Robyn was unconscious but still alive. Paxton then threatened Jimmy. He said if Jimmy told anyone, he would kill him and his whole family. After making that threat, Paxton told Jimmy to go get his aunt, Charlene, and bring her into the room. There was another version of what happened that Rick Schultz heard, which suggested that Paxton had used a baseball bat to beat Robyn, choked her, and then called Charlene in to check if she had a pulse. That part about the bat was not in Jimmy's confession, but it reflected the kind of rumors that were being spread about the level of violence involved in the attack. Jimmy Martin was never charged with Robyn's murder. Instead, his testimony later became a key part of the case against Paxton. His confession was what finally moved the case forward and helped hold Paxton responsible for what he had done. After Jimmy Martin gave a detailed confession that revealed how Robyn Field's murder had been planned ahead of time, investigators turned their attention to Paxton's aunt, Charlene. They brought her in for questioning, and during that interview, she quickly admitted to what had happened. She confirmed much of what Jimmy had described and gave more details that filled in what had been missing. Charlene explained what she saw in Paxton's room after Jimmy had run downstairs. When she walked in, she found Paxton sitting next to Robyn's body on the floor. Robyn's skin had turned blue, and she wasn't wearing anything from the waist down. She also had no shirt on. Charlene was shocked and asked what had happened. Paxton calmly answered that he was merely finishing it. The way he said it showed how little emotion he felt about what he had done. But Charlene's role went beyond just witnessing what had happened. After the killing, Paxton left the room to go find Jimmy, and Charlene stayed there with Robyn's body. Then, around 4:30 in the afternoon, Paxton's mother, Linda Murphy, came home unexpectedly. Even though Charlene knew what had happened, she didn't tell Linda. She didn't call the police either. She was afraid of what Paxton might do, and instead of speaking up, she chose to protect him. Later, Paxton came back and spoke to Charlene quietly so his mother wouldn't hear anything. He asked her to go back upstairs with him. Robyn's body was still there, now completely naked. They began getting rid of the evidence. Paxton put Robyn's clothes into a plastic bag. Charlene handed him a green bedsheet from the closet. Paxton used it to wrap Robyn's body. They carried the body downstairs and put it into the back of Charlene's station wagon. The first place they went was Michelle Jackson's house. While they were there, Paxton walked over to Robyn's home and asked her family if they had found her yet. He acted like he was concerned, all while knowing exactly where she was, hidden in his aunt's car. Rick Schultz remembered this moment clearly. Paxton had asked Sharon, "Have you found her yet?" At the same time, the family dog had started barking and growling at him. Sharon had thought the dog simply didn't like Paxton, but in truth, the dog was reacting to Robyn's body nearby. From there, they drove to a bridge in Metro Park that looked out over the Rocky River. That's where they got rid of Robyn's body. After that, they went to a dumpster behind a Pick and Save store to throw away her clothes. They finished and returned home at around 9 p.m. On May 1st, 1986, after Charlene confessed and Jimmy had already given his statement, police arrested both Paxton Brown and Charlene. Even after being taken into custody, Paxton's behavior didn't change. While staying in a juvenile detention center, he wrote a letter that described the murder. In it, he tried to place the blame on someone else and falsely claimed that Robyn tried her best to strangle her. He also wrote that if something happened, he would run instead of talk, and that he wasn't going to be the only one kissing bars. He ended the letter by saying that if he was going down, others were going to burn with me. His words showed that he wasn't sorry for what he had done and was still trying to control the situation. Eventually, Paxton Brown was charged and tried as an adult. He was found guilty of aggravated murder and sentenced to life in prison. He would be eligible for parole after 20 years. Charlene admitted to tampering with evidence and was placed on probation. Her sentence was lighter because her involvement was limited to helping cover up the crime. Over the years, Robyn's family, especially her half-brother Rick, has worked hard to make sure Paxton stays in prison. They have strongly opposed his efforts to be released. They've spoken out against his attempts to show remorse through websites and carefully prepared apology videos. Robyn Field's family continues to feel the pain of what happened, and they remain committed to making sure her killer stays behind bars.